Hey there, everybody. I've been getting a lot of requests from folks to do tutorials and in particular live classes. But I gotta tell you, I'm not set up to be able to do live classes. As you can tell, this honkingly huge Jacobean cabinet is sitting in the middle of my living room. So I definitely do not have room to be able to host classes. But I thought that doing a couple of quick live videos may be a great way to be able to demonstrate for you some of the techniques I'm using, maybe some of my choices. I know that I had posted this big sucker when I first brought it home. And as you can tell from the inside of this, it is dark, it's brown, and it really didn't show off a lot of the details of the piece. So I'm gonna be switching it up. I still want it to look old. I still want it to look aged. If you're familiar with the gray tone, little bluish vintage cabinet that I had done recently, you'll know that I'm going to be doing a fair bit to this in terms of layering paint. So to give you an idea, and for those of you not familiar with me, I'm Cindy Daychuk with Queen Bee Creations. I'm thinking right now, and trust me, it changes constantly, so the piece tends to take on a life of its own. But right now, what you see in front of you is the bottom part of this has only been lightly primed. I don't often do that, depending upon what the finish is or what the look is that I'm after. But I am looking at this one, the possibility of it having some bleed through was fairly high, so I did a light priming. The top looks a little bit darker because I've already applied the crinoline base. And you're going to see that this is just kind of a light coating. It's definitely not looking at covering everything. But before I'm done, there's probably going to be about 5, 6, 7 or more layers of paint to this. Certainly some waxes and some aging finishes after that. So it will all get covered multiple times. But the paints that I'm using on this piece are all DIY paints. So Debbie's Design Diary. Local stockist here is Shabby Fufu in Hamilton for me. But I also have gone down to the States a couple times and I pick up paint there too. I'm not necessarily brand loyal, meaning I use whatever paints I have. So it's not unusual for me to mix maybe some of my other chalk paints, my Annie Sloan's, with some of my DIYs. But for this one, it will be all the DIY paint that I'm using. This first coat, this one that you see on the upper top, is crinoline, which is kind of like a creamy base. It's going to give a nice tint to it. I may be bringing some of that color back in a little bit later after we've layered some other colors, but it's going to give me a good solid foundation for where I'm going. Other colors that right now in my head I'm thinking of using will be potentially sandy blonde. I think this will be the next one that I'll be layering on it, which you'll see the start of today as well. And definitely a little bit of faded burlap, which is moving a little bit more into the grays. I've got a darker gray, which is letterpress gray, which will also make its way on there. Possibly as well a little apothecary, which is got a little bit of a purple tinge to it. And I may even get into this new color, cherry picked, which is like a Bing cherry, but it would be used judiciously in around some of the details. I'm going to be using some aging later on. Really, we're going to go all over the place with this piece. The idea, have it finish off overall with a bit of a gray tone, but with a lot of aging to it in keeping with its finish. Now, obviously, I had used my brush earlier for some of this, and I hate cleaning brushes, which dirty brushes down in the sink in the basement will attest to. But I just wrap it in some press and seal in between, which gives me, it allows it to stay moist and still kind of supple. This is a little bit drier, so I'm just going to wet it, bring it back to life a little bit.
Derek Carlton's watching. He says looking good.
Hi, Derek. Nice to have you watching. with this particular finish, because I know I'm going to want to age it, what I am looking at, and you'll see my dog going in and out all the time, what I am looking at is not wanting to use straight brush strokes. So I do want to use strokes that kind of go all over the piece and in multiple directions. And as I build up more layers doing this technique, it starts to create more texture to the piece. Obviously on some of this scroll work, which is awesome and is going to look great once I start to add some aging, do a little distressing. I don't need to worry about it so much as just getting some coverage. But I do want to add some texture into the paint rather than laying it down flat. And that varies from piece to piece. Again, it depends upon the finish that you're after. If I'm looking at doing, you know, maybe a mid-century modern piece, which is not as much my jam as the old pieces, quite honestly, I would be using straight, even brush strokes. For this, because we want to create more texture, we want something that some of the aging that we'll do later sits down into, then we want to have the pieces going in every direction that they possibly can. You're hearing Harley, my dog, who quite honestly is typically never far from me, so you're going to see her coming in and out of the frame, probably trying to lie on top of me. She's just recently had some surgery, and she's 16 years old. So as much as she's kind of recovered well and doing fine with it right now, of course the pain meds don't hurt, she is being a little bit of a baby, which I think is fair, and we could all kind of sympathize with. And after surgery at that age, we would probably also want to be spoiled just a little bit. She ended up having an infection in her throat glands and a bit of swelling, and so what they think was causing it was an infection stemming from some cracked molars. So she had the cracked molars for quite a while, and it was just recently that this infection kicked off. So she went in for surgery, and to get those two molars removed, in the hopes that let's see, a brush piece hanging off there, but in the hopes that that was perhaps what was causing the infection. So quite honestly, after the price of surgery, fingers are crossed that this is what takes care of the surgery. But once they got in there and they took some x-rays, it ended up that they removed 7 teeth. So the 2 expected molars, 1 additional molar, and when they showed us the x-rays, I mean, those poor molars, they were flat. So they were definitely broken and not doing a lot of good. But the 3 molars, and then 4 canine teeth. In which case, I was thinking, okay, you don't do dentures. What's this poor dog going to use to chew? But apparently, dogs have way more teeth than we humans do, and she has more than enough to be able to chew. And these were all strategically placed that they weren't really going to impact her in the long run. But for now, for the next couple of weeks, she's eating soft food. So I think she's normally just a dry kibble kind of dog. So I think that she's feeling a little spoiled about all this because she's getting some canned food, and I have to maybe cook her up some yams so that they're nice and soft as treats, because she can't have cookies or biscuits right now, and her normal dried kibble gets soaked overnight, so it's all plump and soft. And yeah, so she's getting spoiled with a lot of food, and we'll have to see in a couple of weeks once her stitches are all healed and she's able to kind of chew a little bit more, whether she's willing to go back to the old food, the old ways. It may prove to end up being a little bit more expensive in the long run if she refuses to eat anything other than just the canned food, but we'll see how that goes. So you can see on the flat areas where I'm able to just kind of cross hatch the technique more than anything else. And for something like this, you're going to want to hold your brush nice and low. If I was holding it way up here, I'm going to be using way more wrist action and I would never get this piece finished. And I've got way too old of wrists for wanting to do that. And you don't want to have to muscle your way through these pieces any more than you have to. So just any direction, there's no rhyme, no reason on that. You're just trying to get a bit of coverage. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect at this layer because we're going to be going back in with other layers. Right? And again, with these big pieces, they've got to stay on the ground. And because I am sitting over top of the living room carpet, I just got big drop claws here. I can't put it on wheels because it still doesn't move. They sink down into the pile of the carpet. So it's having to stay pretty stationary for me, which means I already went ahead and painted the lovely feet on this so that I didn't get, in my first video, a lot of complaints about the fact that I lift it up by hand and tilt it while I'm painting. And that's going to freak people out, and I'll work up to showing you that technique, which I don't recommend, but works for me when I'm here by myself and having to deal with the feet on these heavy pieces when they can't be raised up easily. So what we're looking at doing, hey baby, what we're looking at doing is just laying down this first coat, which I've got all the rest of it done, and I've got the insides of the cabinets taped off. I will be leaving the inside the natural wood color. I will be oiling it up. Usually I will oil it with hemp oil. I like the inside of these old pieces to remain the natural wood. Usually because the wood's a little bit dry, I think that helps condition the wood, especially as we're laying on the paint, but it definitely helps leave a little bit of its character and a little bit of the age to it as well. So I'm going to switch brushes because we're going to move on to just a little bit of that second color so that you see how I'm going to be laying it on. And you can see I've got a mess of brushes down in front of me here. So I'm moving on to the sandy blonde, which is a little bit of kind of a taupey color. And I don't know if you can see that with the lights as they are, but it's a little bit taupey. Definitely a switch up from the crinoline. You can see the difference in terms of the tonality. So this is what's on right now. This is the way that we're going. And that's before we shift it over into moving into some of the grayer tones. I want a little bit more depth with it. And I'm switching over. The brush I was using to begin with, by the way, was an Annie Sloan chalk paint brush. Love them. This brush is a Paint Pixie Dusty. And I gotta tell you, it's kind of my new fave. So they come in two sizes, one that's designed to fit inside of these small DIY paint jars perfectly. Slightly bigger one, which, because right now I got a lot of surface to cover here, I want to have a little bit of a bigger brush, but I'm going to use the same technique. And I'm just going to be cross-hatching this second color over the entire piece. Again, in that random pattern, because I want to get some of that, the slightly raised areas. I'm talking about this as adding texture, but you know, ultimately we're going to be sanding back and this is all going to be a smooth finish. But we want it to be going down into some of the creases and crevices. I'm not looking for it to be total coverage. So this patchy kind of look that you're seeing is really what I'm after with this and where I'm going. So I'm not going to be looking at total coverage. I want to see some of that crinoline peeking through. I want to make sure as well that some of it's going into the lows, some of it's sitting in the highs, but it's not sitting with that complete coverage, so that when I do distress back later, I'm going to see some of those multiple tones peeking through. And that's going to add a little bit more interest and distinction. With these pieces, you know, with this, what you're likely to see is from a distance, it will look like one kind of solid color. You'll see a little bit of the aging, but up close, you'll start to be able to pick out some of the other colors. You'll be able to see a little bit more of that variation happening. It'll add a lot more interest to it, a lot more character to it, but it'll just make it a little bit more of a fun piece overall than just one solid piece. And that's not to say that I don't and I haven't painted pieces all one color. I have done that. I will do that again in the future, I'm sure. But it's not my most favorite thing to do. So I know that I get people that contact me and ask if I do custom work, which right now, folks, the answer is no. You can see from my living room, everything stops when I get a big piece. All the furniture gets pushed back, things get stacked. I have finished pieces that are lining the walls under some moving blankets to protect them until they sell. It's crazy enough, let alone putting somebody's dining room suite in the middle of this room too. But as much as that's kind of a logistical answer, which is a true answer, true logistical answer, the other piece to that answer is most people contact me, they want their pieces painted all pale gray or all white. And I don't have any interest in that. It gets a little too boring, and because this is just one of two businesses, I don't have to be quite honestly taking in a lot of custom work to get by, which is nice for me, but it does mean not so nice for you guys, because my answer is typically always going to be no to the custom work. That said, though, any of the pieces that I do finish, more than happy to sell you, and hopefully they're a little bit more unique and a little bit different, and you're therefore getting something that you can have in your home that is a little bit more special than something that's just white or that's just gray. I'm going to carry on doing this kind of crosshatch. I wanted to give you an idea of how it looks, and again, the whole, it's not a total coverage. We're looking at layering. The next layer, we're going to do the same thing. So I will come back and show you all of the future layers as we get to them, so that you can kind of see the progression that we go through, and you can see how it starts to take shape. They always look awful in the beginning stages as we're layering the paint down. Just expect that. So if you're trying this technique on your own, no, it's going to look awful. You're going to think it looks crazy. You're going to think, oh my gosh, I've ruined this. It's just paint, y'all. You can cover it over. You could take a solid color later and paint it over again if you don't like it. But we're going to be doing an overall sanding down. We're going to be doing a lot of aging in between, all of the beautiful details on this piece. You're going to see me start taking an art brush to some of this to be able to layer some color just down in between crevices even. So it does get a little bit more detailed as we go, but in the beginning stages as we're layering that paint down, this is what we're looking at doing. So as I get this finished, I'll be making my next color choices. I'll share those with you. Share with me your thoughts on this piece, and where you would like to see it go, or what you're thinking about it so far. But until then, hope you have a great Sunday. Enjoy the snow if you've had a big dumping of it like we did. And I'll see you soon, Facebook.